There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. You can rest an entire weekend and still wake up depleted, as though the exhaustion lives somewhere sleep cannot quite reach. You have met every obligation, disappointed no one, kept every version of yourself that everyone else has come to expect, and still, somewhere beneath all of it, a quiet question keeps surfacing. Whose life, exactly, have you been living? Why does a life that looks complete from the outside sometimes feel, from the inside, strangely borrowed? Why can you meet every expectation placed upon you and still feel, at the end of the day, like a stranger to yourself? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Picture a house full of rooms, each one decorated according to someone else's taste, a color chosen because a parent once preferred it, a career chosen because it once impressed someone whose approval mattered, a life arranged, room by room, around what would please the people walking through it, rather than the person actually living inside it. You have kept this house immaculate for years. But has anyone, including you, ever asked which room actually belongs to you? Carl Jung believed that many people move through most of their lives wearing a persona so complete that even they forget it is a construction rather than a self. The persona is useful, necessary even for functioning in the world, but Jung warned that a life built entirely around it, with nothing held in reserve for the self underneath, eventually produces a particular kind of quiet suffering. Not dramatic collapse, just a persistent sense of absence, even in the middle of an apparently full life. So what does it actually look like when a person has been living for everyone except themselves? Rarely does it look like martyrdom. More often, it looks simply like a well-managed life that somehow never feels entirely like your own. The first sign is the automatic yes. Someone asks for your time, your help, your presence, and you agree before you have even consulted how you actually feel about it. Why does your answer arrive before your own preference has had a chance to register at all? The second sign is the discomfort of an empty calendar. Silence, stillness. An evening with nothing required of you, and instead of relief, there is restlessness, a nagging sense that you should be doing something for someone. Why does rest feel, to you, like an activity that must first be earned? The third sign is the difficulty naming a genuine preference. Asked what you want for dinner, for a weekend, for your own life, you find yourself reflexively considering what others might want first. Sometimes so quickly, you never actually arrive at your own answer. Is that generosity? Or has generosity simply become the only voice you've allowed yourself to use? The fourth sign is identity built entirely from roles. You can describe yourself easily as someone's parent, someone's partner, someone's dependable friend, but ask who you are outside of what you provide for others, and the answer becomes strangely difficult to locate. Why does a person's own name sometimes feel less familiar than the roles attached to it? The fifth sign is quiet resentment that surfaces at unexpected moments, not toward anyone in particular, but toward the accumulated weight of years spent prioritizing everyone else's needs before your own. Why does resentment arrive in a life that looks, by every external measure, generous and selfless? The sixth sign is the persistent postponement of your own life, waiting for some future moment when it will finally be acceptable to attend to what you actually want after the children are older, after the promotion, after everyone else's needs have finally, completely been met. Why does that moment never seem to arrive on its own? But here is the deeper question worth sitting with far longer than any single sign. Why is it so difficult for so many people to simply choose themselves? Why does self-neglect so often masquerade as virtue? Jung might have said that many of us were taught, early and thoroughly, that love is conditional upon usefulness, that our worth is measured by what we provide, rather than who we are underneath the providing. And if that lesson was absorbed early enough, choosing yourself later in life does not feel like freedom. It feels, disturbingly, like selfishness, even when it is nothing of the kind. Picture the tree standing bare through winter, appearing from a distance like something finished, something without depth. Beneath the surface, unseen, the roots continue their patient work in the dark. Is the exhaustion you feel now truly emptiness? Or is it simply the visible cost of a self that has been neglected for so long, it is finally, quietly, asking to be tended? This is the turn worth making gently here. The fatigue you feel is not a personal failing. It may be the early signal of something Jung called individuation, the long, uneven process of becoming a person distinct from every role you have been asked to play. Individuation, at this stage, rarely feels like relief right away. It tends to feel, at first, like guilt for wanting something simply because you want it, with no other justification required. So what do you do with a want you have spent years silencing before it could even fully form? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you capable of noticing a genuine preference before it is automatically overridden by everyone else's expectations. Not the part of you that immediately calculates the most agreeable answer. The part that can simply notice, calmly, I want this. And that alone is reason enough. Seneca often reminded himself that life is not short, but that much of it is wasted spent on obligations we never chose consciously, distractions we never questioned, the expectations of others absorbed so thoroughly they came to feel like our own preferences. Can you pause before your next automatic yes and simply ask what you actually want first? Can you trust that your own preference is valid, even before anyone else agrees with it? And here is something worth noticing. If you look honestly, this pattern of self-erasure has likely repeated itself across many years, in many relationships, wearing different faces, but following the same familiar shape. Why does life seem to recreate this same dynamic in new rooms, with new people, until it is finally recognized clearly? Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us tends to reappear in our lives as pattern, as repetition, as the uncanny sense of having lived this particular exhaustion before, somewhere, with someone else entirely. Perhaps this is not simply about the current demands on your time. Perhaps it is the newest version of an older question. When did you first learn that your own needs were only acceptable once everyone else's had already been met? Viktor Frankl believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists narrow, but entirely their own. You may not be able to undo years of practiced self-neglect overnight, but the space between noticing this pattern and continuing to live entirely inside it, that space belongs entirely to you. So what would it actually look like to finally live for yourself, at least in part, without abandoning the people who genuinely matter to you? Not something dramatic. Not a single decision that resolves everything overnight. It might look like sitting alone in a quiet room and realizing, with some surprise, that the stillness no longer feels like guilt. It might look like saying no to a reasonable request, simply because you do not want to say yes, and finding that the world continues regardless. It might look like choosing your own peace over the exhausting effort of being endlessly agreeable to everyone around you. It might look like spending an afternoon on something that serves no one but you, and allowing that to be entirely enough. None of this arrives with fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid facing the emptiness at the center of an unexamined life, and if that is true, then simply asking yourself honestly what you actually want, apart from what everyone else needs from you, may already be a significant act of courage. Return, for a moment, to that house, decorated entirely according to everyone else's preferences. Imagine walking through it now, room by room, asking a simple question in each one. Did I choose this, or did I inherit it from someone else's expectations? You do not need to renovate the entire house at once. You only need to notice, honestly, which rooms are actually yours. And so we return to the question beneath all 6 signs, beneath every automatic yes, every silenced preference. every year spent living just outside your own life? What actually remains of you once every borrowed expectation is finally set down? What remains when your worth no longer depends on how much you provide for everyone else? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps the life you have been living for everyone else was never truly a failure of generosity. Perhaps it was simply a life waiting patiently for you to finally notice that you too were meant to live inside it. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What is one thing you've been wanting to choose for yourself, and what has been holding you back? Write it in the comments below, and let that house, wherever it stands in you, finally include a room of your own.